If you want to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page to gain access to exclusive videos, take part in Q&As, and watch my retrospectives before they go live on YouTube. Hello everyone, it's Oliver Harper here, and I'm back with a new commentary. This time Mathew Buck, aka Film Brain, is joining me for a discussion on the Bourne identity. Mathew has been on the channel before for commentaries on Highlander 2 and Hudson Hawk. This film is Mathew's choice as a troubled production. So how are you doing, Mathew?
I'm doing okay. It's kind of nice to revisit this, actually. I've got a bit of a attachment to the Bourne series because I kind of grew up with it in a sense, so it's kind of nice to get the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, I've never spoke about this film, well, the series on my channel before, so it's not the first time I'm doing it. And obviously, yeah, great trilogy. I kind of ignore the fourth one and the fifth one. Didn't need to be made. Actually, 4 and 5 didn't need to be made, to be honest, but we could probably just explore that a little bit more in the commentary. So folks, if you wish to sync this commentary with your own copy of the film, you can also find it on Netflix if you don't own a physical copy, and put the timestamp to 0 and press play now. Now, I didn't see this film at the cinema. It was one of those kind of things where I was kind of told about it through friends that you had to see this film. And I think down to its success at the box office, it made like, what, over 200 million worldwide. But it was like, I think, from what I recall, what I read was that each week it kept making more and more money. Like, it's a word of mouth had kind of spread on this movie.
Yeah. As I understand it, it held fairly well at the box office. If you look at it, it was never sort of like a breakout hit. It never actually hit #1 at the US box office.
Oh, right. That was it up against Scooby-Doo or something like that?
Yeah, Scooby-Doo was out the weekend that this came out. So that was top of the box office. And Scooby-Doo probably made about double what this made. This came out in second. But it did fairly well. It held fairly well. And I think it kind of really was one of those movies that succeed on just sort of like a sleeper hit level.
Yeah.
I think it did quite well internationally, as I understand it. I did see this in cinemas at the time. I was probably, so this 2002, 11 at the time. This was right when the 12A certificate came in the UK. I think this was the first movie officially released with a 12A. It was so recent at that time that I remember the black card before the movie had the old 12 certificate logo. Because they hadn't updated the black cards yet.
This is based on a book from 1980. And I never heard of the author before until the films had come out. And I think he'd been around for years doing these kind of like, crime thrillers and novels and so forth. And this was something Doug Liman had really wanted to do, wasn't it? Because it was, I think he would then, with his own concept, he kind of changed quite a bit of some of the elements from the book because Jason Bourne is a lot younger in this.
Yeah, it's a very loose adaptation. So Robert Ludlum had this series, and it had been previously adapted as a TV miniseries with Richard Chamberlain.
Oh, nice.
And I remember that came out on DVD around the time the movie did, because they were trying to cash in on it. That one's a lot more faithful to the book for obvious reasons. I remember my older brother being a bit disappointed in the movie because it wasn't more faithful to the book. I think he'd read it, and because it's probably out of the Bourne movies the only one that's really properly based on the book that's titled after. So it kind of, I'd say this stuff fairly early on is fairly faithful, and then later on it really starts to diverge because a lot of the Bourne identity is kind of about Carlos the Jackal, who is a character in the book, which obviously by the time this was made was caught in real life, so wasn't particularly relevant or topical. I suppose they could have changed that into just like a third-party assassin, but that I don't think that really mattered all that much. And as I understand it, Doug Liman gave Tony Gilroy, who co-wrote the movie, basically gave him like a synopsis of the book and told him to just work from there rather than try and actually properly adapt it, which I think works well.
I think it was Lyman's kind of like adapting from the book to his own synopsis. So instead of like telling him this is the synopsis of the book, like in official capacity, sort of like this is my kind of like vision of it.
Yeah.
And obviously doing that process of making this film, then Universal started to get very frustrated with the sort of viewing the dailies and the direction Doug was taking the movie. But it's weird that at the time, it was such a kind of breath of fresh air, this kind of film was, in terms of the sort of spy genre, because in terms of combining it with action, because everyone was so well versed and familiar with James Bond. It wasn't. I think it was kind of the sequel that really sort of shook up the Bond franchise. The sort of see it as this sort of a strong competitor that was kind of 2 steps ahead of James Bond in terms of its sort of cinematic adventures.
1, 2, I think, in that the first movie is a really solid film by itself, but it wasn't a sort of runaway success. But by the time they made the sequel, it was one of those movies that I think definitely benefited from DVD, where I think a lot of people kind of talk their friends into going like, this is a really good movie, you should check it out. And so I'd imagine it's a movie that kind of sold very well on home video. And that's kind of where a lot of its success came from.
Well, I also sort of compared its sort of success with like the Austin Powers, where the first film was this kind of sleeper hit, and then it was massive on video, and then the sequel came out and it was so big, and it was kind of the situation with this one where the sequel just did like double the amount that the first one did. And I think it was also the change in direction, also sort of kind of like I suppose Paul Greengrass's style kind of did suit that sort of spy genre quite well, but did cripple its action somewhat, which we'll kind of comment on later.
Yeah, there was definitely a slightly different approach when Greengrass came on board. I would kind of almost say that if we were to do a Bond comparison, this is sort of like Doctor No, where a lot of the fundamental stuff that we know about the Bourne series as it went on to evolve, it came from here, but they also did in Supremacy. I would argue that's kind of like the Goldfinger, like that became the sort of model for how those films went on to be.
Oh, definitely, that's a good point. Yeah. But this one, it sort of does a great job of sort of setting up this world and the sort of Treadstone, and we obviously don't know fully what Treadstone is. It's all just kind of like, I suppose it's sort of MacGuffin of the piece, where you're sort of told about these things, but don't really kind of not explained particularly well. That he is like he's working for this kind of operative that sort of goes into sort of does a shady
kind of black ops.
Yeah.
I kind of find the way that this movie starts very interesting, because I feel like there's a lot of choices in the Bourne Identity that are kind of deliberately subversive in terms of being an action movie or a spy movie, and I think that's very purposeful, because I think, obviously, as you said, most people, when they think of spy movies, they think James Bond, and I think there was a very conscious effort of trying to avoid being that. So the only real thing I can think of as sort of comparators to kind of James Bond at that time in the 90s is maybe you get the odd John le Carré sort of adaptation. So the Tailor of Panama was relatively recent when this came out.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that was something that a lot of people came to see. Apparently, this scene where he's talking into the mirror, this is one of the very few instances of accurate Dutch in a Hollywood film.
Really? Wow. I didn't know that.
Apparently, whenever characters are speaking Dutch, they tend to just end up speaking German. That's Deutsch, mate. That's Deutsch.
It's also going back to this. I recently was Matt Damon does look so young in this film, and a lot more gaunt and skinny than he does become like sequels where he just gets like bigger and bigger. And like by
he bulks up a lot later.
By the fifth one, he's just like seems to be taking advice from like the sort of the actors who portray these superheroes that are just like built like action figures.
I think at the time there was a bit of doubt over whether Matt Damon could actually carry a role like this, but I think the fact that he is not the expected casting is why it works so well, because I think Doug Liman was kind of shopping it around to various people. Like he shopped it around to Brad Pitt, who he'd later go on to work with on Mr. and Mrs. Smith. He'd shopped it around to Arnold Schwarzenegger at one point, which I don't see how that movie would have worked very well. It would have just come off as another variation of Total Recall.
Yes, it would have done. Yeah, that would have been like everyone would go, "Oh, he's repeating himself."
Like he'd already done that with Sixth Day. Sixth Day is basically like a pseudo remake of Total Recall.
Yeah, yes, right. And that's yeah. Some of they when you look at these sort of behind the scenes of these movies, and when they trying to start a new franchise and they throw out the casting call, it is the same names in terms of that genre. And I suppose if they were thinking that the Jason Bourne was going to be an older character, then perhaps in the lines of, in that age range with those big stars would have been quite suited. But I think going with a fresh take on it, and someone who you least expect to be a sort of spy, and someone who could stand up against the enemies and sort of do some crazy sort of combat. You wouldn't think Matt Damon, but it's at the time it took me by surprise. I was like, wow, he's actually doing a really good job. It's like, because we had this scene, from a year or two before with, The Matrix and Keanu Reeves, who you'd never imagine be able to do all these kind of crazy martial arts, and he does it.
Oh, I'm just going to mention this shot here.
Sure.
So Matt Damon there is actually crouching behind that car as it goes past. That's how they did that effect.
Oh,
So
that's amazing.
if you look really closely, you can sort of see his shoulder peeking out of the back of that car. But that shot kind of illustrates that Matt Damon, he kind of works well as being someone that could easily blend in and be invisible, as it were. And I think that's the true canniness of his casting, in that he looks very young here, but he has that kind of boyish appearance that works for him, because it kind of, you don't really know very much about Bourne at the beginning of the movie, but you kind of instantly sympathise with him because he looks kind of like a little boy lost almost.
He does, yeah.
Yeah. So so the later revelations kind of take you by surprise a little bit, and I think because Matt Damon didn't have the baggage of being known for having any action movie stuff beforehand, it means that it comes as more of a surprise. I mean, later that kind of would become part of his brand almost. Like, he would kind of pop up in action movies, and I wouldn't say that he's appeared in many great action films outside of the Bourne series, but I feel like having like an actor in the role rather than action star does it a lot of favours, I think, because I've seen variations of this that have kind of action stars in them, and they can't really. I wouldn't say they pull off the action side of this. They pull off the action side very well, but the acting side they're not great at.
No. Also, we see Matt Damon sort of take out the policeman in the park, and it also demonstrates that okay, he can look after himself. But also, when I sort of look back at this and you compare it to the sequels, and this one does a clever thing of basically, what Hong Kong cinema was kind of doing was like steady cam, not keeping the camera on a tripod, and nothing shaky cam. You get to see everything, but this does use a little bit of speed ramping with some of the footage. They speed it up, which I completely forgot about. I thought, oh no, it does let it down a little bit. That he's spent time to sort of choreograph the fight scenes and get into it, then they speed it up. I was like, no, that's what Steven Seagal does.
Yeah. I feel like the fight scenes in this hold up fairly well. I was actually pleased to see how well it held up, considering.
Well, the fight scene in the apartment with the biro is like the best moment, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that fight scene that we just saw there in the park was actually something that they added in a reshoot. That was one of the things that they added in a reshoot. So
the great shot earlier where he's just kind of standing there by himself in the city in the snow, and in the background you got this kind of blue light, and I thought. I still love movies when they did the nighttime stuff. There's always an element of blue thrown in, and nowadays they just try and make it look so realistic you can't see a fucking thing.
Yeah, that's something I hate as well. Like this whole idea of realistic color grading.
It's awful. You can't see anything. Even on a massive screen, you can't see anything.
Yeah, there's this real thing of trying to be like, oh, we're going to push the dynamic range and really kind of like, no, just make sure we can see what we're looking at, guys. I feel
the moment here where it was like when they're in that sort of that cafeteria room, it looks like, and you got Brian Cox and the other gentleman, I can't remember his name, but
Chris Cooper,
yeah, sorry. On DVD, I'd never realised the whole background's comped in. And then you see it in high definition and you think, oh my god, yeah, it's really obvious because the lighting doesn't match. And they do it later on when they have when they have to explain what they've been up to and sort of just cover their the cover their asses to their superiors right at the end. The whole background again is comped in. I was like,
Oh,
no,
is it?
oh god, it's so bad. Yeah.
Yeah, they really kind of had to find this movie in editing, I think, a lot of the time. Because, as you said, Universal was very nervous about Lyman as a director, because this is probably the biggest thing that he'd done at that point. Because he'd started out with Swingers, and you would never think that the guy who made Swingers would go on to make something like this. You know, Swingers being like sort of a lightweight comedy. And
He did a film called Go, didn't he?
yeah, he did Go, and that's sort of like the transition movie, because that's a bit more action based. But even so, that's still kind of like a small film, relatively, by comparison.
Yeah.
Whereas this is kind of uncharacteristic for him, at least at the time. But I guess in retrospective, where his career went, this is kind of set the true trajectory of what Lyman would go on to do. Although Troll Productions and Doug Lyman seem to really go hand in hand with each other. Like I hear about a Doug Lyman movie and I go, is it a Troll production? Did something happen on the set? Did the film like not test very well? It always seems to be like, oh, Doug Lyman's directing this. Oh, it's going to have a round of massive reshoots. And I'm not saying that reshoots are bad. Reshoots are like a necessary part of the process. But sometimes when you hear things that have massive amounts of reshoots, you go, well, something's clearly gone a bit wrong somewhere, you know.
There's with the sort of European vibe, it does. I think at that time, actually, even sort of going back to it, I just thought, oh, it's very much a sort of feels a bit like Brian De Palma's Mission Impossible.
Yeah, it does a lot.
With its with how they shoot things and how the camera moves and the editing, it seems more sort of in the early stages. Well, actually, no, I suppose throughout it very much feels like it's taking its cues from the sort of movies of the past in terms of dealing with this sort of spy genre, and and I think it does it a lot of favors, and weirdly, like Mission Impossible 1, and then you have the sequels. Bourne Identity feels somewhat disconnected a little bit from the sequels because because the filmmaking style is a lot different.
Yeah, it is. I definitely think that that Lyman has a very kind of European approach. And I think he embraced that with the fact that I think a lot of the crew that worked on the movie were French, and obviously so much of the movie takes place in Paris. This, I would argue, is an example of how the Bourne series is probably the most influential action franchise of the last 20 years, because there's so much of the action genre now that you can kind of see in this movie. And this scene, for example, where he's kind of reviewing the documents. We were talking about Total Recall. The Total Recall remake just completely lifts this scene.
Well, yeah. Well, even the original one has it, because he opens up the case and it's like he's got money in there, and then he's got obviously got the message from himself. But yeah, it's kind of that usual trick they deploy is like finding a package or something, and it's got a variety of items in there that will sort of help refresh their memory.
Yeah, but I feel like the scene in the remake, the 2012 version, is so clearly based on this scene in the Bourne Identity. It's really like, oh, I see what you did, Len Wiseman. You see what you did. You literally just decide, oh, well, Bourne came out in the middle of it. Why don't we just overtly try to capture a Bourne vibe? And there are so many action movies. As I was rewatching this, there are certain points where I went, oh, and that's where another movie about 10 years later decides to just copy it.
There's I was looking at the passports. One of them was actually kind of out of date.
Yeah.
Like 2001, and then the others were like 2002 and 3. So I was like, oh, I thought, because I know the movie got delayed, right?
Yes, it was. So it was originally meant to be for 2001.
That's right.
At some point, I think it was in the fall. So it might have been a September intended release, which we'll get back to that. It released in June of 2002. So they did. I think they were probably going to bump that release date anyway, because they were. But it was probably going to be fairly late 2001 that it was going to come out, and then they kind of had to really extensively rework the third act in particular.
Well, it was very bunch of movies that were sort of focused around action or terrorism, anything of that nature was sort of pushed back. That was intended for 2001 or September or sort of the fall. But obviously prime being Arnold's film, was it Collateral Damage?
Yeah, Collateral Damage was probably the big one. I remember because the trailer got yanked for that, and then when they released a new trailer which barely kind of told you anything about the movie, which was awkward.
Well, yeah, I remember I went to see Collateral Damage at the cinema, and I thought, I thought it was pretty bad. Then I rewatched it years later. I thought actually it wasn't too bad actually, because it was it was an Andrew Davis movie, so
it's a very middling Arnie movie.
Yeah.
I feel like he's miscast in that film. That's kind of going back to the discussion we had a minute ago about how sometimes having an action star can be a bit of a distraction. I feel like that's the kind of role that probably, like, the difference between something like that and The Fugitive is that you have Harrison Ford, who, we know Harrison Ford as Han Solo and everything, but he's also an actor, whereas Arnold, he's kind of having to struggle playing what is ostensibly quite a difficult part.
Definitely. Yeah.
As someone who has all this grief and trying to do the action stuff.
Well, this was, as you mentioned, Harrison Ford, because he was, the 90s were sort of full of these kind of films that adapted from novels, crime novels, thrillers, and obviously with the Clear and Present Danger and Patriot Games.
Yeah, the Jack Ryan series. Yeah. Which if we were to compare Matt Damon's partner, Ben Affleck, he was fronting the reboot of Jack Ryan at the time, The Son of All Fears, which I think had opened about a week before this.
Oh, really? Yeah. I do remember. Was it? No, sure. Did it come out a little bit later? I can't.
No, it was right around the same time. These were literally in cinemas, at least in the US, at the same time as each other.
Blimey.
I would argue that Matt Damon is more successful here than Ben Affleck was as Jack Ryan.
There's so many Jack Ryans, isn't there, now?
Yeah. There's nothing too wrong with The Son of All Fears. It's just not a particularly interesting movie. I guess the thing to talk about is that obviously released in 2002 and very heavily delayed from 2001 is the fact that, of course, September 11th happened during the production of this movie, which impacted it quite a bit, actually. The originally released DVD didn't have any of this stuff, but when Supremacy came out, they released a special edition, or an extended edition, as it's sometimes called in some areas, and that version features an alternate opening and ending that bookend the film. So. And an accompanying featurette about it, where they were really genuinely worried that the film would feel like it was out of date, because of the sort of the political mood of the time, obviously. And so, because the movie is kind of overtly critical of the CIA, they're kind of the bad guys of the movie.
Yes.
And it's kind of interesting seeing them talk in the featurette. So Frank Marshall, the producer, he has this quote that kind of stuck out of my mind, like, okay, where he says, the movie's kind of about, political assassinations and very overtly critical about that. But, at the time, that's maybe the sort of thing we should be doing. And I'm like,
what?
You sure about that, Frank? That's one of those statements that 20 years later you go, well, that's a bit of an eyebrow raise.
Well, it's like I just recently watched a sort of JFK sort of revisited of Oliver Stone's new documentary, and it's like the bad guys are the CIA,
Yeah,
and it's common thread with these kind of movies,
Yeah, I feel like if anything, the Bourne movies were not out of step; they were kind of prescient in a way, where they were kind of sort of critical, I guess, of kind of foreign policy and black ops and all of that sort of thing. And, I feel like that's kind of the reason for their success. I mean, obviously, Paul Greengrass and Matt Damon kind of made that more overt when they made Green Zone.
Yes, yeah. Which is a good film. I thought it was a very good film. I enjoyed it.
I haven't seen that in ages. I remember being disappointed by it at the time, because I felt like it didn't really say anything that I didn't already know, really.
Right.
At least that was my personal feeling about it. I don't think it was helped by the fact that the trailers were trying to, again, the sort of playing on Matt Damon being kind of known for the Bourne series. They were really playing it as kind of like a Bourne movie in the advertising, complete with the quote of "Bourne goes epic." I'm like, what the hell does that mean?
It goes epic.
Literally a quote on the DVD box. I remember that.
Oh God! Should have had a quote from Jonathan Ross. Greatest movie ever.
Should have had a quote from Paul Ross. That's the real staple of quality right there.
This is always. I love this sequence here because it's a great display of sort of stunt work, and obviously got a rock climber to do it, and you can sort of cuts back to the stuntman who has I think more of a receding hairline.
You could the stunt where he's hanging off the building. Definitely you can tell that's the stunt guy because his hair is a lot longer than Matt Damon's in a couple of shots.
There's some comp work here, like digital. Yeah, it's pretty good actually. It stands out quite well. It's a little bit soft. But it works.
Yeah, I think why this movie, that cut really annoys me because that's clearly just the tail end of the shot from a few moments ago where he was looking over the edge because the little spire there is kind of still wriggling, and obviously you can see the edge of the platform. I'm like, could have cropped that in a little bit to hide that. But yeah, this is really Matt Damon, I think, towards the end of this stunt.
Oh really?
Yeah, I
think they've got them on some wires, have they, I presume, as well?
Yeah, I think he scaled the last 30 feet of this building.
I'll do the last 2 feet.
yeah, that's definitely him right there. So, I mean, that's still pretty tricky.
That's him.
Especially if
you're
not like a climber.
Yeah.
I think his little fleece jacket. I don't know if this is an intentional detail or that, but the little holes in the back of it. At least to my mind, kind of remind me of the sort of bullet wounds in his back. I don't know if that was a deliberate costuming choice, but that's what I kind of thought. Like the two biggest holes sort of seem to be in the spots where he was actually shot. Now, Franco Potenti, I think, is probably one of the most underrated parts of this movie, actually. Especially when you watch later installments of the franchise, because obviously they kill her off in Supremacy very early on, and I
was kind of a bit pissed off by that, because they sort of build up this kind of relationship throughout the movie, and they sort of fall in love, and at the end it ends with a happy ending, which could be seen as a sort of a traditional Hollywood trope, just having the audiences not be kind of upset by the end. But it sort of deserved that, and once the sequel opens and they kill her off in the first act, in the first 15 minutes?
Yeah, first 15 minutes. I think she's about 17, 18 minutes into that movie in blammo.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, fuck's sake. But then I suppose it would be, then again, like, where would they go? What would they be repeating this kind of thing where they're together on the run, or either she just kind of left out the equation, but then she'd also get hunted down later on because of her association with him. So yeah, it's kind of a difficult way to go.
Yeah, I can sort of understand why they did that. I think in the book Supremacy, I think Marie is also killed off, which is one of the few recurring elements between the book and its film adaptation. But
I suppose you need a sort of dramatic element to sort of kickstart the sort of emotional impact.
Yeah, I feel like that's always a thing that annoys me, where they deliberately kill the love interest or things like that. That's I believe there's a term for that. It's colloquially known as fridging, because there's an infamous comic book where I can't remember which comic book character it was, but finds his girlfriend stuffed dead in a fridge. Like a really horrible, nasty moment, and that's kind of become like a common term now to refer to that sort of you kill the love interest to give the male hero character it's personal now. And yeah, it's so cheap. It's really bullshit, especially when it's like done in a way where it's very offhanded at the beginning of the movie. I don't think Supremacy is quite that serious in it, because obviously it does I think it drives a lot of Bourne's emotions later in the movie, so it kind of feels a bit more justified than a cheap shot, but even so, it's still something that annoyed me at the time, because she is very good in this movie. Now, I want to have a little personal rant here about the fact that all these scenes on the Blu-ray, they've used a clean copy of the movie, which has taken off all the captions that are supposed to be appearing at this point, like all the little messages that are being sent to these people, and they're all coming up as player-generated subtitles, which annoys the fuck out of me.
yeah,
especially because there's accompanying sound effects and everything.
That's right, yeah.
here's a specially ruined version. And I know exactly why movie companies do this. It's because when they're releasing a movie internationally, it's because they don't need to have 60 squillion versions of it on the disc or whatever. But even so, maybe in some instances, kind of leave it in, please.
I know. Well, it's all that bugs me is still with where there's in the UK would have in the past definitely like a different cut of a movie, and now the Americans, because now with Blu-rays and DVDs, they just released the US cut, so we're kind of missing the theatrical European version. It's gone now because it's no longer, it's part of the US, and it also starts with the FBI warning, like, hey, wait a minute, I don't think you have any jurisdiction in the UK.
Well, you say that, this movie's an example of it, actually, if I recall.
Really?
Yes, it is. So the version that played in the UK was about a minute longer, and Doug Liman talks about this in his commentary. So one of the battles that he had to face was the farmhouse scene, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to it. But I distinctly remember there's a very quick scene in the US cut, which is this version has become sort of like the default one now, where they have a very quick dinner with the family, and it kind of cuts to the next scene. That's actually longer in the international version. It was like a compromise that Doug Liman had to make, because Universal was going, oh, you need to kind of pace up this bit. It's too slow, and it's only a minute. It makes no difference really in the grand scheme of things. All it does is really kind of properly introduce the kids a little bit more, kind of makes you understand why Bourne's a bit more attached to them, the way that he is.
Yeah, because in the film, in the theatrical one, in this cut, he just sort of goes into their bedroom and just sort of stares at them while they're sleeping, which is a bit creepy,
Yeah, there's a bit more justification there.
Justification, right, yeah, okay.
And I distinctly remember when I saw this theatrically, that scene was present, but it's only on the DVD and Blu-ray in a really rough-looking version.
That's weird. It's like, it's perfectly fine on another print, you know what I mean? It's odd.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen that in about, 20 years, that scene actually integrated into the movie, but I'm certain it was there when I saw it theatrically, because I remember that little beat being there.
I do like the scene early on though, when because we were talking over it, but when he approaches her to sort of ask for a lift, and he offers her the money, and she's like, I can't. She goes, okay, can I have my money back then? She's just like, okay. Quite a good perfect way to encourage her and take the money away.
So Franca Potenzi, she was kind of really known for Run Lola Run at the time, wasn't she?
That's
and
right,
that was kind of cast on the back of that. And Run Lola Run, really good movie. I haven't seen that in about a decade since I was doing my film studies course. I really should go back and revisit it, because again, I feel like that's one of those movies that's very influential. And she was on some of the posters for this movie, as I recall. They got her in like a running pose just to really evoke the memory of that movie.
Yeah. This film contains a lot of running.
Yeah. But I feel like Marie as a character she provides a sort of grounding for Bourne as a character.
Yes.
And kind of I feel like they're two kind of people that are on the run, but for very different reasons, because obviously she's kind of from this sort of Romani background, so she's been going around to every sort of place, never really settled. And that's kind of like Bourne in the same way, in that Bourne, he's an assassin, he has all these different identities and different covers, and so he kind of moves around. So they're kind of well suited for each other in different ways.
Yes, yeah, because they refer to her as a sort of gypsy, don't they?
Yeah,
and, she's sort of sort of struggling to pay her bills, or she's got no kind of it hasn't really. Yeah, she's only paid her bills in like a number of countries and sort of keeps jumping around. So as you say, it's sort of their sort of paths somewhat mirror each other.
And I feel like they have a good chemistry with each other, which makes the romantic side of it feel believable.
Yeah,
like it's very. Definitely. I feel like a lot of this movie, it's kind of quietly played. It's not really super overt. It kind of, it's just nicely done character work, and I think that's why this movie and the Bourne franchise, at least in its early installments, is why it works so well, is because actually it's not being driven by action, it's being driven by character and story. And so the relationship between Marie and Bourne feels like it comes to the fore very organically. Like when they reach the apartment in Paris, you can kind of see that she's sort of kind of flirting with him and kind of laying her hair down literally with him until like the attack happens. And so when she starts to kind of more overtly make a move in their relationship.
Well, she makes a move on him, doesn't she? He doesn't yeah. So it's generally it was written in a way. Most he's kind of like, especially with Bond, he's always kind of on the prowl, as it were. So he always sort of gets his way.
I feel like that's a combination of the writing and Frank Potente, just because they did adjust the way the character was portrayed a little bit while they were filming. I think some of her choices, I think, really help with making Marie feel like a very believable character, because you could very easily see a version of this where the sort of the shift into a more romantic angle sort of feels like it comes completely out of nowhere and is totally unearned.
Oh, it's completely earned in this, though. I think,
yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is absolutely earned, but you could definitely see. I've seen movies that have tried to do this where they don't have the chemistry between the actors, and then when they try to make them romantic, you just go, no.
No, yeah. I mean, also the film could have worked if they didn't have a romantic angle, but it was just kind of a what if, based on the choices he made. So yeah, it could have gone either way, and it still kind of would have worked. But yeah, she just kind of like, what I like about it is that she is kind of accepting of what he says, but still kind of just like baffled by his kind of disagreements with her, or just like his trying to sort of form his own memories, and she goes along with it, and she's given options to leave, and she still sticks with him. You don't really know in her head what she's thinking, why she's made this decision, because she's putting herself more at risk. I think maybe just down to the fact that she wants to see him sort of get back to his normal self. But then once she realizes that he is an assassin, she's kind of in shock, and
yeah, I think she's written quite as an independent character, and I think that she's given a fair bit of agency in the script, more than you would commonly see for the sort of the female lead in a lot of these movies, where I feel like they are just written as being a love interest, and for the lead to literally talk to. And yeah, that's sort of the case here, but she's fleshed out enough that she actually feels like a person,
Yeah, definitely. I love how where they've parked the Mini right next to the river. You cannot do that. You can't just like park down there in Paris. It's like classic, classic filmmaking, isn't it? Where they just, I think when it comes to the big car chase, I think Doug Liman said, if you lived in Paris, geography makes no sense whatsoever, because it was all just kind of saved in the edit. String it together, because I think Alexander Witt was the second unit guy shooting that, and then you've got across town Doug's shooting these kind of other scenes. So Alexander Witt is like, I think we're still one of the best sort of second unit guys out there.
Oh yeah, Alexander Witt is so here's a trivia question for you. What connects Bond, Bourne and Triple X, aside from the fact that they all had movies released in 2002?
Well, would it be the case that Alexander Witt did all the second unit on them?
Yeah, that would be the case, because he did Bourne and Triple X in 2002, and he's gone on, of course, to work on the more recent Daniel Craig Bond movies.
Well, yeah, I think he's considering he's one of the best at sort of second unit stuff. When it comes to directing a movie himself, he's not found that sort of a leap yet, because he did Resident Evil Apocalypse, or the second one, which is bloody awful.
That's basically, hey, you pulled out your Anderson is busy, can you just take over? But Anderson is really kind of, pulling the strings a little bit.
Yeah. I suppose Alexander Witt is kind of like the Peter MacDonald of his of his time, where Peter was doing all the action movie stuff behind the scenes,
And if the new Craig movies have a definite Bourne flavour, which they do, that's a big reason why.
Yeah. It was clear, come Quantum of Solace, that it was that was like taking so much from the Bourne films, and that was and it just didn't work quite as well. I think stands the script as well. The script was always going to be the problem.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to kind of look back at where action movies and like spy films were kind of at this particular point in time, because when you think of action movies from the sort of late 90s and 2000s, you kind of had two things that came to mind. You either had sort of your big Jerry Bruckheimer sort of big bombast movies,
Like Tony Scott thing, you know.
Tony Scott, Michael Bay, yeah, or it was, you know, kind of late period Arnold, Sly. I mean, by 2002, they were very much kind of hitting the skids. You know, Stallone was in his sort of direct-to-video phase, really.
Yeah, with it, what was
Avenging Angelo and Detox or ICU.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and Get Carter. You know.
Of course, we have to remember that Detox was a theatrical release over on our side of the pond.
That's right. Yeah.
But it was a direct-to-video release in the States. But
Look at his amazing apartment. Everyone would like dying to have something like that, you know, and just. And I do like the moment actually because it does play on the fact of, especially like a horror movie really, where once the bad guy breaks in and he's kind of watching him because the camera then becomes his point of view as it sort of looks in and sort of goes all handheld.
I was going to say, I did pick up a kind of like a little subtle horror vibe about this movie when I was rewatching it, because, you know, this kind of idea of, oh, he's an assassin, but he doesn't realise it, and so it's kind of, you know, he's got all these sort of powers that I guess kind of startle him and scare him, and he doesn't really know what he's up against, he doesn't know who he's fighting, he doesn't even know who he is, and that's like really kind of scary, and you can kind of see that at certain points.
It falls into, I suppose, a similar character trait with the film Dark City, where the main protagonist is, obviously because of the swapping all their memories around, and he was actually a rapist, and then he kind of switched into someone else, and he's horrified by what he has done, but it's not him because I swapped their minds around, but he's as he unravels his past, he's found out he's killed all these women, but it's not him. But that was kind of, that was, I suppose you could see as a sort of comparison piece where he is, you know, in an argument, well, not an argument, sort of reflection of your comment about horror, that he's been killing all these people, and he's like, oh my god, it's not something I wanted to do, you know.
Yeah, I have these abilities and I don't know how I've got them, and I don't know, but I know how to use them, and I know how to use them with deadly force, you know?
Yeah. There's some moments where you think, how far has his memory sort of, you know, crawled its way back in? Because there's moments where he starts kind of being extremely organised with trying to evade the authorities. So some it's coming back, but it's just kind of, it's trying to piece together.
It's almost like it's kind of, I guess, sort of implied like the training is almost like conditioned.
Yeah,
almost, like it's become second nature.
It's like muscle reflex, isn't it? Sort of.
Yeah, it's because there's that recurring little thing about the headaches.
Yes,
it's kind of like a little minor plot
when
point.
Clive Owen comments.
So I that was an idea they kind of ran with in the Bourne Legacy, wasn't it?
That's
the
right.
Fourth movie.
They sort of start, once they start kind of going back into the training and expanding it more with the backstory, it somewhat becomes less interesting. You know.
Yeah, I don't feel like it's really necessary to know all that kind of stuff, and it's kind of makes it more interesting if we don't fully know, because it makes Bourne a lot more surprising. I mean, the Bourne Legacy is kind of a ridiculous movie. So, if you don't remember the Bourne Legacy, and I don't blame you, to be honest, that was the one that didn't have Matt Damon in it. That was the one with Jeremy Renner as Aaron Cross, I believe his name. And it was sort of like a sidequel to the Bourne Ultimatum, where the events of that movie are kind of happening off screen, but it's really following, I guess, another sort of fellow Treadstone / Blackbriar agent. Like he's at some sort of remote training facility with Oscar Isaac before he gets blown up, and then like they go into this thing where they're like genetically modified, or they have some sort of like chemical that they need. Like my prevailing memory of the Bourne Legacy is Jeremy Renner running around going, "I need the chems! I need the chems!" These cream pills. Like, it's really super important that he needs these, because otherwise he is, and I quote, "going to run out of brain." I'm like, what does that mean? Is he going to crash like a computer? Is he going to turn into like a dribbling mess in the corner? like very, very silly stuff.
That sounds ridiculous. Oh my god. I've only seen bits of it, so I was just like, no.
It's a long movie. I think it's the longest out of any of the Bourne entries. It's like 2:15. It's so, it's that one was directed by Tony Gilroy. So Doug Liman didn't really have much association with the series after the first film, because obviously him and Universal butted heads so extensively, and so Paul Greengrass kind of took over. But I feel like the real kind of, I guess, consistent element was Tony Gilroy, who up until the fifth movie, I can't remember if he wrote the fifth movie or not, but I feel like he was very much in charge of the franchise for the up until Legacy, where he took over as director. I think he was very much like a consistent co-writer.
Now this fight scene's, obviously probably the standout sort of fight scenes at the time, because it was seeing Matt Damon do all this kind of like I don't know what style they kind of trained in, maybe sort of Kung Fu or Wing Chun or something like that, because they're doing a lot of close combat fighting, or maybe some sort of the new type of martial arts. So I remember Batman Begins had a different style of kind of martial arts they were trying to incorporate.
So apparently, I'm just looking this up, it's a combination of Filipino Kai along with Jeet Kune Do from Bruce Lee.
Oh, Jeet Kune Do. Okay, cool, yeah.
So, fun fact, the guy that Bourne is fighting against, he's played by the guy that actually trained Matt Damon.
Oh, amazing.
Which is why they're working so well.
That's good. Because also he's a bit like a robot, isn't he? Because he falls on the floor and he sort of gets up like a T-1000 or something, and he pulls the bio out of his hand.
I would have to say he's not the greatest of assassins, in that his technique is to just barge in through the window.
Yeah, he's a bit noisy, isn't he? Put it that way, you do a bit more subtly. But I love how he just like it's a great reaction from Marie as well, because he just like jumps out the window. She's like, "Why do you do that?" And then she's she's about to be sick as well.
Catatonic. I feel like this is kind of the blueprint for the fight scenes that would come in the Greengrass movies, where it's the Bourne series very much known for kind of improvised weaponry. So he kind of uses a pen there as a knife, which I remember being a really kind of ooh moment.
Yeah,
like really ow.
Was it the second? Was it the second or third one where he uses the rolls up a magazine? Doesn't
it's the second one. That's the fight scene with
you want to get like a Yellow Pages book or something, a telephone book.
And that works. It makes the fight scenes feel credible. It's not like pow 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 and everything. It kind of felt like something we hadn't really seen at that point. That kind of spontaneity, and I think that's there he goes. Whee! my brother would found that to be a bit of an unintentionally hilarious moment, just him sort of yeeting himself out the window. You were mentioning how Marie is very much in shock after seeing that, and that's something that feels very realistic,
definitely,
and kind of subdued, and that was apparently her deliberate choice. So apparently, the way it was scripted by Gilroy is that the character would just become hysterical, and I feel like they felt that was a bit cliche, and that kind of took away from Marie's agency a bit. And you know what? That was absolutely the right call to make.
Definitely, it's something you don't really see in these kind of movies. With the spy stuff. It's always going to be referencing James Bond to a certain degree, but you never had the women who were going along with him never reacted that way.
It kind of feels.
I think maybe perhaps GoldenEye sort of addressed some of those sort of things where she'd kind of like been in shock and. But not to the extent where she's like going to be. She was initially like she's like gone so pale and she's throwing up down the stairs.
Yeah, I feel like that little beat there with the housemaid being shot in the head, like that beat doesn't need to be there because it doesn't make any sense. Like if he's barging in through the window, was he need to execute her beforehand?
Definitely. It was just to sort of give an extra element of shock, wasn't it?
Yeah. But I feel like, again, going back to the idea that this is very uncharacteristic for an action film. Like, it's not got the traditional beats in a lot of ways. Like a lot of action movies, they kind of start on a big action beat, and that the movie doesn't do that. It instead kind of has this very subtle kind of drawing you in, and that kind of puts you in the mind of the intrigue of the movie. Like that, the movie's more driven by the kind of mystery about who Bourne is. Like we kind of get hints about it because we're kind of cutting back to Langley and all the sort of interpersonal office politics, as it were.
Yeah. But also with Langley, it sort of demonstrates, even though they're miles apart, they're still kind of, catching up to him.
Yeah, that's kind of creepy, isn't it? The way that's that's what really freaks out Marie, is that they have a picture of her in the embassy from literally the day before, and they've already got a wanted poster out, and that is kind of really, unsettling, to say the least.
God, yeah. I mean, it
just kind of gives you a sense that they're everywhere. They're sort of omnipresent, and Bourne doesn't even really know what he's up against.
No, it shows that sort of Orwellian kind of like world where you're sort of constantly being watched. Yeah, definitely that would scare most people, I think.
And in some ways, that kind of that is a precursor to the sort of I guess modern surveillance, as it were, of technology today.
Oh God, yeah. Now that's kind of like, it becomes the main element of investigation, doesn't it? Where I think it's somewhat sort of a detriment to it, because you're just watching CCTV or just people at computers. It just becomes a bit boring. It's like the whole when you watch something like a making of a movie where they're showing you how to blow up a miniature or do the optical effects. Now it's shifted to people at a computer, these kind of wireframe models. It just loses its impact. And it's
I feel like because of the moment this came out in, it feels very much like a kind of transition movie from the sort of I guess the kind of older kind of surveillance state kind of movies, the sort of ones that was kind of, I guess, really came to the fore in the 70s, which is of course when and the 80s, which is when Bourne was first written, and the sort of, I guess, the sort of very kind of modern espionage thrillers that we get kind of post-Bourne, as it were. And I think you can even see that transition kind of take place within the franchise itself, where it becomes more kind of computer-based, whereas this, because of the fact that it's in 2002, what really struck me about rewatching it is how much of the movie takes place around payphones. Try finding one of those these days.
It does, because he is not using a mobile phone. And
not for the most of the movie.
No.
It's only until fairly near the end, and it kind of gets like this, almost like a big introduction. Like, he's got a Motorola flip phone.
God, it's like it was. I remember the time when The Matrix came out, everyone was obsessed with that slide down kind of phone that he has. Everyone's like, "I want that phone." All the
one with the little kicker at the bottom.
Yeah. Everyone was obsessed with trying to get that phone. It was so expensive. But it's with, in terms of like the sort of technology and so forth, I think actually earlier on it was quite amusing, because they always do this in films. They find footage or recording of someone standing in the street. They find Bourne talking to Marie, and it's like, it's from a distance, and they go zoom in and sharpen it up, and it's like it becomes like perfect quality. Yeah, you still can't do that.
It's kind of restrained in this movie to a little bit, but it's still kind of, in 2002, that seems a bit far off nowadays, because of course, what's that program, Topaz AI Enhance, that one that you can kind of upscale footage in. I feel like that technology is almost kind of reaching the point where it is becoming credible to see it in a movie again.
Yeah, it's but in Mission Impossible, I think the first one does that, and it's like, even at that point, it's just like, it's like, no, that's not possible. Yeah. But that was dealing with like floppy disks, you know what I mean?
Don't copy that floppy. That was I'm reminded of the worst example of the enhanced trope I think I've ever seen. It was in an old episode of CSI Miami, where they're watching surveillance footage, and I can't remember if it was David Caruso who said this or not, but there's a ridiculous moment where he goes, "Well, can you change the camera angle?" and they literally like shift it like around a corner to get a better angle.
Oh my
like,
God.
What kind of stupid science fiction bullshit is this?
As you know, we've got the epic car chase with a great sort
Yes.
of music track behind it all. I can't remember, what track was that? Who was that produced by? Was it just a? Was it? Oh God, I think it was again now. The music they use. But this is obviously the sequence where they sort of had to sort of salvage it in the edit, because obviously second unit team would probably just shot shitloads of stuff, and you know, not really kind of thinking how are we going to get from point A to point B perhaps, and just had to sort of put it together in the edit, because every time it cuts to Matt Damon you know, in the car, it is a sort of, you know, green screen shot, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it's in terms of just sheer execution, though, it's probably still one of the best car chases in film.
Oh, it's
like, it's one of those you can really throw up there with the likes of Bullets.
Oh,
and the like.
Also, the track is Ready, Steady, Go, isn't it, by Paul Oakenfold and Andy Gray. Yeah.
And it's just so cool. Like, it's just a really cool car chase.
Oh, it's really good, yeah.
And it's so propulsive. Like, the editing's really quick. Like, yeah, it makes no sense in terms of geography, but I can tell you that a lot of car chases are like that anyway.
yeah, it's just sort of just give you that sort of intense moment where they, you know, it's like cutting to a lot of close-ups and cutting to the gear stick, you know, changing gear and, like, you know, avoiding pedestrians.
If I recall, this is one of the action beats they kind of added in a reshoot, because it's never you would think, given that Julia Stiles' Nikki is keeping tabs and everything, it's kind of strange no one mentions this massive car chase through the centre of Paris. But that is a minor quibble. This so I was watching this specific bit here where they're going by the scene, and I was thinking to myself, oh, that is exactly where A Good Day to Die Hard decided to copy its car chase from.
Oh shit, yeah.
Because there's a section of that car chase that looks almost exactly like this bit in Paris.
My God.
Like, very clearly copied from this movie. And I know, and this is the thing about I was saying about the Bourne movies being hugely influential. You can see its impact on other action franchises where they start trying to overtly copy Bourne, and A Good Day to Die Hard is an example of that, where it's doing Die Hard, but it's trying to be Die Hard meets Bourne, but you know, it's shit.
Well, yeah, basically, yeah, because the studio is just going to be like, well, we want an action scene like this from this movie. Can you do that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure, we can do that. Yeah, you know.
Well, I feel like it doesn't outstay its welcome, this car chase. Like, it's really impactful. It's fast moving, but it you know, it's just the right length, and then it stops when it needs to. Whereas the car chase in A Good Day to Die Hard goes on for about 15 years. Like, it goes on for such a long time, and it's ridiculous. And it's so over-edited. Like, compared to this, like, you can clearly tell that the editors knew what they were doing, knew how to pace the sequence, whereas A Good Day to Die Hard, there's so many different variables, there's lots of quick cuts, like, the geography's all over the place, it's really frenetic. They've literally copied the bit where they crash into the van right back there, but they decide to do it at least 3 times.
It's great how, because it doesn't feel shoehorned in, and there's a moment where, you know, it's great. Also, it shows that Bourne is aware of the car's faults as well, because he says, "Oh, it's a bit spongy suspension, all the tyres are," and she goes, "Oh, it leans a bit on the left," or something like that. And the police surround and they sort of shoot off. And then once we have this kind of crazy car chase, it comes to a standstill, and there's this kind of awkward pause between them right now.
Yeah,
as they sort of like, what just happened? And
this particular moment here where he just immediately parks the car and goes, "We can never go back to this car." Like, that is so great, and and it kind of is a nice way of bringing the audience back down. Like, okay, we've kind of indulged the genre a little bit, and now we're taking it back to a grounded place.
Yeah. It could have been like, they could have thrown in a bit of comedy there, but they didn't. They just sort of had this little, I suppose you could sort of, you know, the comedy is derived from their sort of awkwardness there, but it's, you know, it's the tone throughout this movie is so consistent. I think that's what I like about it.
And I think you were mentioning how the car's not really sort of like, you know, you think of like a Bond movie car chase, and obviously he's got the promotional tie-in vehicle, and everything.
Yeah, there's none of that. It's just got a banged up Mini, which is great, you know.
But it's kind of cool in its own
Italian
way
Job
because
thing, you know.
it kind of overtly brings to mind the Italian Job, which kind of again makes it feel very European. And I mean a proper Mini, not the current Minis now that are just regular sized cars that just happen to be called Minis. The proper, there's something kind of cool about the old sort of Mini Coopers. The you kind of watch back this movie and there's so many recognizable faces in it.
Oh, definitely.
And so many, like,
well, even
tiny roles.
Yeah, even like the small roles here, where you got the gentleman who's appeared in a number of Tarantino movies. What's his name? He was in.
Are you thinking of Walton Goggins?
Yeah, Walton Goggins. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's, you know, so you often see him with his kind of like southern drawl accent, and
oh yeah, he's been the bad guy in a lot of stuff, hasn't he? He was. I think this was right after Shanghai Noon, wasn't it? Where he got a bit of a nice little good villain role in that. Well, secondary villain role.
God, I've not seen that film in years. God, I saw that.
Oh
Somewhere.
man, I still have fun with those. That's another one of those sort of childhood favourites of mine.
Yeah,
you know?
I did like those films. Yeah.
See, my prevailing memory of the Bourne identity is that it was definitely one of the earliest movies that I had on DVD. You know, when it started to become very affordable.
I love the yellow casing for it as well. The UK one. Yeah,
mine was just a black one because I think I got a later sort of pressing. But I remember I spent a lot of my teens with one of those portable DVD players. One of those ones with the screens, like a 7-inch screen.
Oh, I know.
And I would watch stuff. I would all the time on that, and the Bourne Identity was one of those that was in frequent rotation.
Because for me, it was like getting DVD. It was like getting Blade. Blade was a common title. A lot of my friends got when they first got DVD. Then it was kind of like The Matrix and Ghostbusters, I think, because of the, I think a lot of the time it was buying these movies because they had all these special features, and it was sort of, they were sort of touted as being like, oh, amazing picture, and everyone was sort of, that point, wanted to see all these films in widescreen finally, because people couldn't afford either getting Laserdisc at the sort of now died off at that point, or it's always kind of difficult to find the widescreen version of a particular film on VHS because only some labels would do it, and charge you a little bit more.
I feel like DVD was the point where kind of the technology kind of caught up with what people actually wanted. You had widescreen televisions coming in, so you could actually watch the movies in widescreen and things like that. And I remember the first edition of the Bourne Identity had the DTS track, which they for some reason dropped from the special edition.
Oh yeah, DTS, that was a really good mix. I remember that.
That was the thing back in the day where like, oh, you got to get the version with the DTS, mate. You got to get the DTS.
Yeah, it was, because it all kind of stemmed from. It was talked about in home cinema forums that if you had it goes back to Laserdisc, where you had the DTS version of a movie and one was Dolby Digital. The DTS one always sounded like more meaty and more punchy. You wanted that one. He did a good job cutting her hair, didn't he, Jason Bourne? He was just getting scissors.
Turns out hairdressing was a secret skill of his. That was part of the hidden treadstone training. Like, you got to blend in. So getting your barber's course now.
Yeah. I'm going to go for a bowl cut, I think.
You were mentioning how Matt Damon's kind of lean in this movie, and I believe that he was given the direction that he kind of had to carry himself like a boxer. Yes. Which I guess makes sense.
Yeah,
he's
boxer,
kind of muscly, which I kind of he kind of got into the more traditional action movie game, especially in the later sequels. In Jason Bourne, he has that scene where he's doing the bare knuckle fighting, and he like whops out the guy with a single punch, and you can really appreciates Matt Damon's workout routine. I think this is also kind of because if I remember Matt Damon, the reason why Matt Damon looked gaunt for so many years is because one of his first major breakout roles was in Courage Under Fire, which like he kind of appeared in stuff like that and Saving Private Ryan, but he wasn't really the lead in those movies, and he wasn't like sort of so. Like, he'd done a little bit of action stuff on the side, but not really, sort of known for that stuff. But Courage Under Fire really got people's attention because that was kind of, the extreme diet thing, where he was playing this PTSD shock veteran, and he really slimmed himself down to the point where he had to be hospitalised.
God.
Yeah, so I think he had to sort of. So I think he was kind of being medically watched for quite a while after pulling that particular stunt.
Jesus. Well, Christian Bale pulled a similar stunt in The Machinist. He got, he got even more frail in that.
Yeah. If you watch him in Courage Under Fire, like, he is alarmingly thin in the present day scenes of that movie.
Yeah. I mean, watching The Machinist was like, it was kind of a bit grotesque, seeing to the point where he was so bony, and I think he was just drinking like just a bit of whiskey a day or something like that. That was about it, or something stupid,
Now, I didn't appreciate up until I rewatched that guy there that's kind of spots Wombosi is this guy that was looking at is the guy that was watching Bourne in the Swiss bank.
Was it? I didn't know.
Yeah.
My God.
I like this jump cut, by the way.
It's a great edit.
Like that really kind of shocks you because it's so unexpected. I remember that really making me bloody jump when I saw that in the cinema because I was not expecting that.
It also, I think, for so long people had thought that Clive Owen could be a good James Bond, and this is, I suppose, it's his only sort of time. Or maybe he's done other things that maybe similar.
He's done a couple of little things, like he did the International.
That's
kind
right.
of forgettable sort of European thriller.
Yeah,
I remember being really boring, but it had that one really good shootout in the Guggenheim.
We're seeing Clive be a somewhat Bondish character.
Yeah. I believe Clive Owen didn't really have a huge opinion of his role in this movie because he's not actually in it all that much. Apparently, he only has 3 minutes of screen time overall, and he described it as, well, all I have to do is put some glasses on and pose. It's kind of playing off of his appearances in the BMW adverts at the time. Like, this was kind of when he was kind of ascending up the ranks a little bit. Like, he wasn't like a name at this point, but he'd kind of done stuff like Cropier.
He's kind of a funny actor as well because he still gets a lot of acting roles, but his movies don't really generally do that well. I think he's more popular in the USA than he does over here.
I feel like he's never kind of truly broken out in the way that he kind of could have done. He could have probably been a credible Bond, but I feel like I don't think he's interesting enough.
I think he openly admitted that he said he would ruin it. If he
I think he's fine not being Bond, and I'm fine with him not being Bond. I mean, he looks the part, but I don't think he has that sort of, I don't know, that kind of thing that would make him very memorable in the part. Whereas Daniel Craig, again, I think going back to the casting of Matt Damon, you cast Daniel Craig, and that felt kind of unexpected in a way because he hadn't done anything like that before, and obviously that was what his detractors seized upon at first.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I feel like he's really approached Bond from sort of like making him a character again.
Yeah.
Where as opposed to just here's a plug-in main character and the adventure goes on around him and he does his thing and he does the same things over and over again.
Well, this is, with these, with whole Bourne films, that you're not there for the action, you're there for the character, and
I feel like that's what goes missing in the later ones. I feel like by Ultimatum, it is kind of getting to the point where they are running out of a story to tell, and so Ultimatum kind of felt like that was where they were going to wrap things up, and then they kind of continue past it, and there really isn't all that much to say.
No, that's true. It's true, and the way they sort of deploy more characters to sort of expand the story was like often characters with kind of similar roles or just have a difference of opinion to the previous person they're replacing. So like a new, like
David Strathairn in Ultimatum is basically like another version of Chris Cooper.
Yeah,
in this movie, and like Edward Norton again in Legacy, Tommy Lee Jones in Jason Bourne.
Yeah.
And Tommy Lee Jones, who looked very bored in that film. Don't blame him, to be honest. Everyone looked kind of bored by that point, including the audience.
Did the fifth one do well, or?
I don't think it did all that well. Like because I feel like that was kind of setting up for another trilogy of movies or something like that, and they've not followed through on that. Like the Bourne series is kind of still ongoing because they've got that Treadstone TV spin-off, which is about to start on the Channel 5 Action, incidentally.
Channel 5 Action? Oh, it can't be very good then.
Yeah, it's their rebranding of Paramount Network. All action, all the time. But yeah, I feel like that's the route that a lot of franchises go down. Like, oh, we're not making movies about it anymore, so here's a TV series that no one watches.
True though.
Look at you, Jack Ryan again.
Yeah, they keep doing that, don't they? How can we just milk the cash cow even more?
But yeah, the problem that I had, especially with the most recent Jason Bourne, is that as the films progressed, Bourne got less interesting as a character because he started reverting back to type and became this kind of solitary assassin, and that meant that he got less of a personality the more that we learnt about him. At the beginning of this movie, like, he feels kind of open with Marie, can express himself. Like, yeah, he kind of goes into that spy side, but he also feels like a human being. Whereas by the time of Jason Bourne, he's become like this robot. Like, in Jason Bourne, he has about 20 lines of dialogue in the whole movie.
Yes, it doesn't say much.
Goes around from place to place to place, and like the whole, like, at that point, you just go, well, we've lost him, you know.
Well, it's kind of like once he's kind of got his memories back, and it's a point where else are you going to go with him? Either he's going to go back into that line of work where he doesn't want to do that anymore. So, well, if he's not going to do that anymore, you can't make any more movies because it ends up being boring. What's he going to become, like a carpenter or something? So you. Yeah, there's only so much. There's only so many sequels you can drag out of that sort of concept of him trying to, align his past with the present.
I was kind of actually thinking while I was rewatching this, like, what would be my pitch if I was doing a Bourne sequel? Because, that is the question. Like, where do you take a character like this? And that's kind of the problem that they were talking about at the time that they were doing Ultimatum. Like, oh, we're kind of making this as the last one anyway, because we know that, there is only so much story we can tell. Where do you take the character? And I believe Matt Damon or Paul Greengrass said something in an interview where it might have been with Mark Kermode when they were promoting that movie, where they said, oh, if we make another one, we might as well call it the Bourne Redundancy. And you watch Jason Bourne and you go, well...
Yeah, it's. I mean, how many? I suppose they could have gone back to the books, but I don't know if the books had sort of progressed that far for him to sort of, had. I'm not sure how many books had been focused around Jason Bourne.
I suppose they could have done, because Bourne is still a successful book franchise. I think the books kind of came back into fashion around the films, obviously. Needless to say, Robert Ludlum is not writing them on account of being dead. This movie is actually in a memorial to him in the credits, because I believe he passed away while the film was in production.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think my pitch, if I was going for a new Bourne movie, is that I would kind of go for this idea of, well, Jason Bourne isn't a guy that lives in the shadows anymore. He's kind of gone public, So instead, he's decided to kind of publicly criticize the CIA and kind of write a tell-all memoir about his experiences and how he remembers them. He's kind of figured that, okay, I can't live in the shadows forever, because if I do that, inevitably they will track me down, or they will do something where they will tie me back into it. Whereas if I'm in public, I'm protected in some way.
So essentially, he would spill the beans. He'd be a public figure, but then he would still be on the run to a certain degree from the CIA, who are going to go hunt him down and shut him up.
Well, I feel like at that point the CIA, the damage has been done, especially because all the events of the last few movies, they've got increasingly public, and it's hard to cover that stuff up, and people kind of know who he is at this point. So I was kind of but then someone kind of comes out from his past, like maybe someone that he previously targeted, and he kind of takes revenge on him, and so he's kind of, he doesn't really remember that stuff, but he's kind of forced into this very uneasy alliance with the CIA, who he doesn't really trust, and they don't trust him, and like they've got the files, but they're classified and everything, and they're kind of gonna screw him over, so it's not really a perfect union or anything like that. But it would just be an interesting sort of restructuring of all those little variables, because the problem with Jason Bourne is that it's just going through the motions again. It's like, and here's another thing about Blackbriar Treadstone or whatever it is this week, and here's another CIA boss that wants to kill Bourne. There's the shaky camera work and the fight scenes and the.
Well, that was. I remember I interviewed Joey Ansel because he was in. He was in the third one, wasn't he? I think he was battling out, and he was a bit upset with the editing. With the fight scene, because it didn't look like on the dailies when they shot it. Look back, it looked good. And it came to the edit, and I think there was artificially, like they'd shaken the image as well in the edit.
Oh, they added like artificial shake.
Yeah, so just like disappointed with that, because they spend months choreographing it to look great, and then they shoot it. They shoot it correctly, but then in the edit they've zoomed in on the image, they're artificially shaking it. So there was definitely a skill set for that, that shaky cam style of editing. It is not difficult. It's not easy to do, and to edit it the right frame where you see the connecting hit before it edits. The timing is extremely tight on those things. But it can give you motion sickness, make you feel a bit unwell. Because if you, I remember watching, I think the second one on like a second viewing, and I sat closer to the cinema screen. I was kind of looking up, and I felt a bit sick,
Yeah, I feel like shaky cam kind of gets a little bit of a bad rap because it's been abused so badly, like the sort of it's kind of like high frame rate stuff and things like that. Like Spielberg kind of really kind of brought that in with Saving Private Ryan. And there is a little bit in this movie, but not to the way that Greengrass would later go on to use it, where it's kind of designed to make you feel like a participant in the fight scenes, and it's meant to kind of disorientate you, kind of adding to the sort of verisimilitude. In some instances it's okay, but there are certain moments where it gets a little bit too much. I feel like that was really the case in Jason Bourne, where it's just like, and throw the camera around erratically for no real reason, just to give the illusion that something exciting is happening. And that's what a lot of really bad filmmakers, I think, do. Like, there was a reason why shaky cam was sort of like this blight on the action genre, and I don't think we can really blame Bourne for the sins of other bad filmmakers just trying to copy it. But it feels like an excuse by a lot of filmmakers to just go, oh, we don't have the time to properly cover or shoot this, just shake the camera around, we can hide the fact that the actors don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, cause it's frustrating because, when I interviewed people in the past, when it comes to Hollywood films, the Matrix kind of, even things where, the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon would come out a couple of years later, but they'd shown you how to do action scenes, like fight scenes to that degree, and this is how it's supposed to be done. You can see everything, you know what's going on, you're not confused by what you're seeing, by the choreography, because it's all like it's all like an elaborate dance, isn't it? And then when you have this complete switch where, as you say, the Bourne films had influence on the genre with the style of editing, and then other filmmakers will try and copy it, but as I highlighted earlier, it's not easy to do that style, to get it right. If you get it right, it can work extremely well, but it doesn't really sort of there's always going to be a 50-50 on it, because the other 50% who love action will be annoyed by it, and also the people will be sort of getting motion sickness from it, or the other side who kind of enjoy the sort of, as you say, to sort of be somewhat of a participant in this sequence, and it's sort of it got a bit muddled up, and they're still doing it. Yeah, I think the recent was it the G.I. Joe kind of spin-off movie?
Oh, Snake Eyes.
Snake Eyes was heavily criticised for its awful editing, and
I feel like those kind of films are more an anomaly now. Like I feel like broadly speaking, movies like The Raid and John Wick,
another influence
and
kicks
sort of
in.
Kingsman,
Yeah.
have kind of taken over the action movie genre now, and thank goodness for that, because what they've really brought in is an emphasis on stunt work and having really kind of very physical choreography and making sure that the camera is a very clean participant. And so I feel like that the action movie genre has been aided immensely by the popularity of those films. You can definitely see it's in the trend that I notice now, where there's really kind of an emphasis on doing a fake one. Like it's not a proper one because there's like different camera setups, but the sort of Kingsman style seemingly continuous shot, which you saw in No Time to Die and various others, and the new Scott Adkins movie One Shot, which is I believe that for the entire running time. And so that's kind of where action has kind of moved since. So kind of seeing Jason Bourne in 2016 doing the standard Bourne style, it felt like again the franchise once so very pioneering now is just kind of going through the same old motions, and now feels really kind of out of date with how everything else is going in the genre.
Because it was innovating the genre, especially with the spy stuff, and then and with the action in as well. But you say it's sort of it was kind of it was sticking to its old roots and wasn't spicing things up with each sequel.
Yeah, and I you mentioned motion sickness, so here's a fun fact. Jason Bourne was released in China in 3D.
Oh my god! Oh, dear.
And there were reports of mass evacuations for people to throw up.
That's amazing. I still recall I think not down to motion sickness, but just down to people just being grossed out. I think one of the Saw films when I was at Cineworld, the reports of the staff downstairs, because I was upstairs in the projection booth, so I didn't really see much going on. These big burly men were bursting out of the auditorium, being sick into the bins. It was just kind of like a weird sort of image to see these kind of guys who would probably be able to sort of enjoy that type of horror were somewhat grossed out by it.
Yeah. I wanted to mention this just a minute ago, but that scene with Brian Cox walking in. So again, having to use all the editing tricks in the book, that shot of Brian Cox actually walking out the lift is actually a repeated shot from very early on in the film, where he walks out of the meeting early on.
Oh, really? So
they use the same shot twice.
Oh, amazing. But I never noticed that. So there's certain things you can get away with, isn't it, with these sort of things? It felt like the conversation Cox had earlier on, about what's going on. It felt like a scene that had essentially been cut in half, and then they moved that scene back a bit. It sort of feels like it's still part of the same conversation.
Yeah, this particular scene, this is the one that's extended in the international print.
Right. Okay. So is it more of a sort of? Do you recall the sort of dialogue? Is it just down to just knowing more about the children, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's just the children kind of introduce themselves. There's no major important dialogue. You can just tell that shot of him taking the drink there is a substitution to end the sequence early. And it's not like a pivotal scene or anything. There's nothing really hugely revealed. It's just a little extra character beat, and I know why the compromise was made, but it just feels unnecessary. Because this was apparently a real kind of problem that Universal had, was that I think they wanted a more traditional action movie, and Doug Liman didn't want to make that kind of movie. So I believe at one point they sent notes to him saying, "Oh, well, could you do a bunch of sort of high octane establishing shots, like a Tony Scott kind of establishing shot to bring in the finale?" And I think he sent back a very tense note that said something along the lines of, if you want Tony Scott to direct this, then have Tony Scott direct it.
Well, because it's obviously observing the dailies, wanting more kind of explosive action. But what one thing they sort of cite is the shootout at the farm or the house. I think it's a brilliant sequence because it's like he knows first of all that he's been spied on, obviously probably by a sniper, but by surprise he goes straight out the front door and shoots the propane tank and to create a smoke screen. Yeah, I think it's a great surprise, and watching him just sort of speed through the bushes holding a massive shotgun. It's a good sequence, it does something different where he shoots into the sky to get the birds to sort of circle around Clive Owen. It's all sort of clever tricks he's deployed.
It's a really excellently done sequence. And it's sort of like the capper to this whole section of the movie. I feel like Universal's problem was that they really wanted something like high octane and everything, and they just didn't. They felt like this kind of slowed down the movie, which it does a little bit, but I don't feel like it drags the movie. Like you watch a movie and sometimes when it kind of goes into kind of shifts down gears a little bit, you can feel like it drags a little bit. But I feel like it still moves relatively briskly, and that was the thing that I appreciated when I was rewatching this. I was kind of worried, like, oh, is this going to feel a bit slow these days? Is this going to feel like it can't actually hold its own because of the sequels and everything, which kind of pushed into a higher gear? Whereas no, actually, because the character work is so strong, that's what carries you through. Like, the characters are interesting enough that you actually care about having that little breather before that the big sort of shootout with the professor.
It's obviously with Universal's complaints about the action. I think I remember wanting them to be a little bit longer when I first kind of watched it, or maybe on repeated viewing. I think, oh, this could have been a bit more stuff happening here, but because he's supposed to be efficient and fast at what he does, it wouldn't make sense for him to sort of have a long-winded kind of chase or just a shootout, because he's good at what he does, and so is his opponent. So things would happen in a quick way.
It's a real kind of battle of wits in that.
Yeah, definitely. Because even though this is not the final action sequence for Jason Bourne, the bit in the sort of apartment block, or sort of the office, where he uses this guy as a human shield, essentially. No, he uses him as a surfboard or something. It's brilliant. Completely a bit unrealistic, but it's great.
I think the what really helps a lot of the Bourne fight scenes is that kind of again, that sort of improvisation and that kind of coming up with something really in the moment. It makes them very surprising and unexpected.
Yeah.
So like you see here, he knows that something's wrong, and now he's trying to find something that he can improvise with. Something, like is there a weapon in the house? Oh, I found the shotgun shells. Where is the shotgun? Like you can see the sort of thought process very clearly kind of conveyed.
Yeah, definitely.
And you can like instantly follow along with it, and that's what kind of good editing and good storytelling can do in a particular moment. Like you follow the sort of mindset of the character. Like, it really puts you in his shoes.
Oh, yeah. I love this bit here. He goes out, shoots the tank, boom, and then massive explosion. Yeah.
Big trailer moments explosion.
But also, I love it when the explosion kicks off. It cuts straight to Clive Owen, who sees it, and because you get a sense that you're being watched, but you haven't seen him yet until his reaction.
Yeah, you don't exactly know where he is. And then it's revealed to, and he's sort of like surprised, like, oh, I didn't expect that. Like, he doesn't realise that he's already been rumbled, and now he's sort of improvising as well. I believe they shot this in a very unique way, where Alexander Witt was doing all the stuff with the professor, and Matt Damon was all being shot on first unit by Doug Liman, and so they kind of shot them both simultaneously, and then converged in the middle.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Apparently, they were struggling to find a way of making this particular sequence interesting on a visual level until they kind of realised that, oh, they could actually shoot this at about waist height, and then it kind of makes it look like everyone's being kind of hidden in the grass.
Yeah, yeah. I'm surprised that his character kind of dies because the two shots he gets from Jason Bourne's like they seem to be to his arms, I suppose because it's a shotgun, it's just a spray of this shell, or pellets, right into his chest maybe.
Mm-hmm. I find it really interesting when he has that kind of speech with Bourne, because obviously the character hasn't had any lines of dialogue until this point, and he just sort of glowers, and normally in an action movie, he'd either be immediately killed off from being shot,
yeah,
or he'd just sort of cackle, or do some sort of evil thing where he kind of pull a weapon immediately so he gets shot again.
Yeah, but he just sounds like a normal guy, doesn't he? It's just a job for him. He's not. He's not. Typical bad guy trope. Just like having this.
Yeah, like suddenly they kind of share a moment. Like he knows that he's dying, and there's kind of a mutual respect between them almost.
Yeah.
And it's again a sort of a nice kind of human moment that you wouldn't characteristically see in a movie like this.
Mm.
And that sort of moment, like, oh, well, look what they made you give, and that sort of moment, like, oh, it's another one of those kind of reminders all throughout the movie, like, actually, this capacity for violence is a really horrible thing to have. Like, it's just this really awful thing. Like, what was that line from Unforgiven? You've taken away all that man was and all he was going to be. That sort of idea.
Yes.
Yeah, and that kind of, I believe that line kind of comes back at the end of Ultimatum, doesn't it? So at the very end, like Bourne says that to the guy that shoots him on the rooftop.
Mm.
And that's kind of I remember that being a bit unexpected of a callback. I was not expecting them to call that back.
You sort of seem like they're sort of, and I don't think they ignored this one, did they, with the sequels? I mean, they're still kind of like this.
Yeah, they kind of played upon it.
Yeah.
Like they used it as the sort of framework, and I think in a lot of ways it's like it works as its own movie, but you could tell that you could really expand upon this.
Oh yeah, what I think is really good about this is that it has a solid start, middle, and an end, and it could have been a one-off thing, because he has got his memory back to a large degree, I think, and he gets to be with the woman he met, and those who were in control have either been sort of killed off, or the whole operative side of things has been shut down. To sort of cover their tracks, to sort of not get arrested or whatever. So yeah, it stands on its own, and I think the sequel does that as well. I think the sequel again sort of leaves it open a little bit more obviously, and that a third one could be made, because Universal made so much money from these films, and the sequel was such a massive hit. They weren't going to put it to rest.
Mm-hmm. I think that This is probably the only Bourne movie that has like a proper ending.
Yeah, it does.
Whereas
I
feel like the sequels they do have conclusions and they wrap themselves up, but they're left kind of more open ended than this one is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Where so Supremacy finishes.
Well, it's also because Jason again sort of has nowhere else to go again. You know what I mean? He's kind of somewhat back to square one to a certain degree, because he's not with anyone.
Yeah, because he hasn't got anyone. Like, he's alone by himself, and the more time he spends alone by himself, the more isolated he becomes. And this is sort of, I guess, him kind of reverting back to his ways. Like, this is him kind of confronting the people after him, like now he knows really what he's up against, and now he's kind of figuring out how to kind of use his abilities against them in a way where they're no longer in control of the situation.
He's got a few gadgets there, hasn't he? He's got a tracking device and
yeah. He's got a few little bits, but nothing major. What I find really interesting about the scenes in Langley is that it is literally just sort of like this office environment, like this really kind of like small sort of subsection.
Yeah.
It's like you've seen a lot of sort of genre spy movies that, they're in this, big control room, and they've got this huge video screen that they're watching all the action on, and the computers look really kind of sleek and slick. And the later Bourne movies would kind of do that imagery.
Yeah.
But in this movie, everyone's kind of really tightly cloistered in this, wood panelled office with big chunky white computers of the period, and they're kind of, they're all huddled together. There's a microwave next to the door for when they do an overnight. like it feels very office environment. And even the stuff between Conklin and Abbott, it's very kind of office politicsy.
I think it plays on the idea that this kind of team are supposed to be off the radar, and if you're passing by that office, you wouldn't think, none the wiser. You'd think it's just another sort of admin team or whatever, and if you found out what they're up to, it was kind of like completely, against the law. And I think it works for it. I think it despite it being this kind of secret operative, it's not hidden away. It's just kind of it's there, but it's kind of
it's kind of hiding in plain sight almost.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
I recall that the third act was definitely where they were kind of having problems kind of figuring out how they were going to end the movie properly. And this is where the most extensive kind of tweaking happens. I find it interesting seeing the scenes with Chris Cooper and Brian Cox, because they're kind of really well acted. And Brian, two kind of really tremendous actors. Brian Cox, of course, would get a much bigger role in the second movie, where he kind of really came to the fore. But even here, he's kind of like the boss of Chris Cooper, and kind of like breathing down his neck. That sort of intrigue between them.
I love the sort of bait and switch with the next assassin. Because you think, okay, another one's going to be sent out to kill Bourne, but it's been sent out to kill Chris Cooper. Which we haven't actually commented on, because I love the idea that throughout Europe, all these hotspots, they've got these agents just kind of waiting for the phone call. Where in the past with James Bond, sometimes they would deploy that sort of like someone's been called to go get Bond, but often they just turn up and think, well, wait a minute, how do you know he was there? Or often be like the villains just kind of just appear out of nowhere to have a car chase.
So I think if I recall, a lot of this stuff in the third act now is what they did reshoots on to give themselves an ending, because there were loads of kind of different endings that they were going through. I know that this stuff here is definitely a reshoot, because it establishes all these like henchmen that Bourne has to fight against, and I think those were all added to get that action scene at the end of the movie, because the original finish of the movie was a lot more kind of low key as a confrontation. Didn't really end on a big action beat.
I think in terms of sort of if I was a Universal executive, I'd probably say you would need a sort of final of something a bit bigger than what you've seen before to sort of finish off the movie.
That's kind of what they said at the time, and I think Doug Liman kind of agreed with them. Going back to the sort of to the fact that this was in production around the time of 9/11, Doug Liman mentions in the featurette about that alternative opening and closing of the movie. He mentions how he was kind of planning this big action sequence as the third act, like it involved like a huge gas station explosion, and that was kind of all scrapped. because the kind of the feeling of the time, like, audiences don't want to see explosions in movies anymore. Like, we're not going to see any of those in films anymore, and it's kind of strange to look back on that time and the sort of mindsets like, oh, we're not going to see any movies with destroyed buildings or anything like that. We're not going to see any explosions, and that's obviously completely wrong. If anything, the movies afterwards really went introspective about it and kind of incorporated that imagery, maybe sometimes not very tastefully, but definitely kind of incorporated that. Like, Spielberg kind of explicitly draws those parallels in his version of War of the Worlds.
Yes.
But it's kind of interesting seeing all these movies that were kind of made around the immediate time and how they were affected by it in all these different ways. So that forced them to kind of retool it down to maybe being a smaller scale confrontation.
Ultimately, it does sort of give a better sense of reality to a certain degree. Sort of, not everything's gonna, when you saw movies before, the changes made around this time where people just shoot a car and it explodes. It often happens. Often providing sort of comic relief to a certain degree to the action fans because it's just so unrealistic. But it's also kind of fun to see. But yeah, with this movie, we've had one explosion. And it was just like someone shooting a gas canister, a large one. But
I believe that there was another alternative ending that pretty much everyone that worked on the film hated. That was scripted, that involved Bourne being chased by people on motorbikes with rocket launchers.
Oh my god!
Which I believe Matt Damon referred to derisively as that motorbike and rockets ending.
God.
And that would have been shit. That would have totally derailed the tone of the movie.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I do feel like some of the later Bourne movies, that while they do try to keep in the sort of, I guess, more realistic style of the Bourne franchise, the action sequences, they do get a bit sillier in the later ones, like the amount of stuff that Bourne kind of gets away with. It's
inherent with sequels, isn't it, where they have to sort of give a little bit more, then it becomes a little bit farcical.
I feel like as the sequels went along and they got less story, they compensated by making the action sequences longer, and that kind of culminates in Jason Bourne with the motorcycle sequence in that movie, which goes on for about 60 years.
It could be great. It would be great for this film to have an alternative ending where you find out that Jason Bourne's a robot.
Yeah,
great, wouldn't it?
There is fragments of the original ending still in the movie because they didn't get Julia Stiles back because she was already busy on another movie. So all the stuff with Julia Stiles here, this is all stuff from the original ending.
Oh, she disappears, doesn't she? Just out of the blue, like she's tidying up getting rid of everything. Then she just sort of goes, doesn't she? Or doesn't he tell her to leave? Doesn't he? Jason comes in.
Well, he doesn't explicitly tell her to leave, so he kind of looks at her, and she doesn't really react after a certain point because they're using cutaway shots of her to try and keep her in the movie for a little bit. But she just kind of stands there, really. So this is sort of the original ending, and there's a little kind of transition point where it kind of switches into the new footage.
There's always, as you mentioned earlier, thought of like the reshoots. People always sort of see that as a bad thing. And a lot of the time it is down to sort of like, because not, you watch the rough cut and you think, oh, we need something here. We haven't got enough cutaways. We haven't got enough this and that. This doesn't make sense. And I've even making my current documentary. I know I planned ahead on what I wanted in terms of like I'm going to shoot enough coverage of B-roll stuff, but you never know. I know I will have to shoot more because you have to cover stuff that what people talk about. You think, oh shit, I didn't even shoot that. I've got to go get it.
Well, sometimes you do something and you realise, oh, guess it doesn't really work. So, sometimes ideas just don't work.
Yeah.
So I think right when he steps into this room, like here, that's where the reshoots sort of come in.
I think you can actually tell that the photography actually changed a little bit there. It's a little bit darker as it new edit comes in.
Yeah, so that's a shot from the old ending, and now here's all the new stuff. Because obviously Chris Cooper is avoiding walking too far into that room to reveal the fact that they don't have Julia Stiles back. Kind of interesting, actually, Julia Stiles. You know, she's her Nikki. She kind of became someone that has appeared in nearly all the films, apart from obviously Legacy.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
And that's interesting because obviously she's a very kind of minor peripheral character in this, just sort of providing intel on the ground. And then they brought her back in Supremacy, and she had this larger role. And then in Ultimatum, like she became the love interest, and they kind of drew parallels with Marie, which I thought was a bit of a weird decision, a little bit, because obviously, like, they've got 2 movies, and the characters have never really interacted in that way, and now suddenly.
Yeah. I suppose at that point where they hadn't introduced another female character, so sort of show that, you know, Jason Bourne still likes women. He's kind of he has needs, and have to throw her in, you know.
And then in Jason Bourne, they do the stupid thing and fudge her again.
Yeah. Yep.
they bump her off, and I remember being pissed off at that. Like, oh, we're just doing the Marie stuff again.
Stop killing all the ladies.
yeah. Stop killing them just for. And that was definitely like, if Marie's death felt earned, that definitely did not feel earned, because you definitely didn't feel the impact of that later in the movie.
Do you think, with these kind of quick flashback elements and the shaky cam and the sort of slow down of some of the footage, you think that is the studio sort of trying to get that Tony Scott influence into the
maybe
edit?
It's I think it's kind of like meant to show that like the memory's there, but it's really kind of fragmented and piecemeal, and it's kind of almost painful in a way.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, it does have that. It does give it that kind of action vibe. And I think I said earlier, this movie's kind of structured like a mystery, and so this is kind of like the big kind of, I guess, whodunit in a way. Like, oh, like here's all the pieces that we've had kind of set up, like, and now, you know, just to really hammer it home, like, this is what happened. And then you can't. And the fact that Bourne kind of has this moment of conscience in a way, it's almost like his humanity comes to the fore at the worst possible moment.
Yeah, because, you know, doesn't want these kids to see their father be shot. You know, and there's also, do you think there is, you know, you could argue that the audience are waiting for Jason Bourne to play catch up because they kind of know how it's going to end. In some cases, you know, in the case of things like Blade Runner, where you kind of, you know who Deckard is after, you just wait for him to play catch up. So there wasn't any surprises in that regard. But in this, because it's how it's written, and how it's sort of played out, you're interested in that journey of him trying to connect the dots.
And also the fact that there wasn't any hint beforehand about why exactly in that moment he didn't kill Wombosi until it's actually finally revealed. So you're getting new information there. It's not recycling things you've already seen, which is kind of key.
This is a great moment. I love this.
Yeah. Wham. Oh, cut back to Julia Stiles. Still there. Last shot. Bye. See you in the sequel. We managed to get you back for at least 3 minutes. Like, she did fairly well considering, you know, minor part in this film.
Yeah. Yes, that's like a horror. You know what I mean? This bit here is great.
Yeah, the door latch.
Yeah.
You can tell that something's behind it. It's just a matter of when. And again, it's not like a huge like action sequence. It's not drawn out as a fight scene.
I love how he's got the gun upside down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sort of sideways. Yeah.
It's very kind of stylish. You mentioned how it was very European. I forgot to mention it does kind of feel like they drew a little bit of inspiration from Nikita. You know,
well, yeah, I think there's a comment about that online that he saw it as a sort of Nikita, and also, you know, French action cinema with, you know, very much sort of pushed
it feels
by
very much kind of like
Luc Besson.
Leon.
Yeah. Besson, you know, sort of been doing that for years, hasn't he? With was it Robert Mark Kamen?
Yeah. And this is probably the only moment in the movie where it gets a little bit silly, but they kind of
so good. I was saying that as when I was like, you know, when this came out, I was about 20 or something when this came out. So it was like see that bit when he shoots him as he goes down. I was like, whoa, that is fucking cool. I was like,
shoots him in the head in midair and then lands on the body as a cushion.
Yeah, that's like, oh, you never seen Bond do that. But when he lands though, because of how the stunt works, the fat guy's going to use this kind of shield, lands first, but then he kind of lands to the side of him, so his legs, so to speak, completely fucked.
Yeah, it's a little bit unbelievable that he gets up from this so easily.
Yeah,
but even so, it's nice to see him kind of wounded again, because again, I feel like a lot of action heroes at this time are kind of a bit on the invincible side.
Oh, sure, yeah.
There is definite
a bit of a flesh wound, what I mean? It's like the last action hero sort of, spoofed at the end when he's completely wounded. He goes back into the film. He's just like, oh, what's this? It's a flesh wound. It's like, so good.
And even the way that Conklin's killed off here kind of surprised me at the time, because you're expecting this kind of big confrontation, and then Bourne just kind of lets him live. Like, he doesn't really want to kill people, and that makes sense with his art, because obviously, and the way that they've cut this together, you think that the assassins come for him.
Yeah.
Cutting from Bourne to him, you think they're doing a parallel edit, like that's who he's looking at, but no. And then the fact that Conklin kind of gets this very, again, kind of low-key death, where he's just kind of wandering through the alley and just gets casually bumped off as part of like this kind of cover-up. Like, it's perfectly in keeping with the world of the movie. Not even a word uttered, just like, oh shit. He looks at him, knows exactly what's going to happen.
He puts a lot of bullets in him as well. It's like, I've come all this way, I'm going to use this gun, much as possible.
His orders were to make sure he was fucking dead.
Definitely a double tap there,
Abbott's thinking is, well, this guy has caused enough damage already. It is easier to kill him than it is to kill Bourne.
Oh god, yeah.
And
he can just make up any old lie. You know what I mean? And which he does. He's just like, oh, this is some sort of trading
program.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very much in keeping with the world of the movie. And I think that they succeed in having. I do feel like the third act of the movie is a little bit weaker than the first two acts, but not hugely. I feel you don't feel like they had too much of a problem in the end. It kind of came together.
It was. It's a 2-hour runtime. Give it, take off the credits. It's going to be about an hour.
Oh, I see what you mean 50. About the comping.
Look at that. Yeah, it's comped in. It's so bad. It's just his hair. You know what I mean? It gives it away. I'd say it's probably. You could have cut out 5-10 minutes and it wouldn't have affected the movie. I think it's usually these sort of films clock in about an hour 45. It's kind of a perfect sort of runtime for a sort of actiony kind of movie. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's overly long. But if I was gonna, if you were pushed, you could cut out 10 minutes, make it a little bit tighter for its kind of third act. But it's it still works extremely well.
Even the ending here is in a more kind of low-key fashion than it could have been. And if you want to see evidence of that, just refer to the alternate opening and ending. So going back to that, so the alternate opening and ending of the movie, because they were worried that the film would not feel very contemporary, they decided that to film essentially bookend sequences set in Mykonos here, where Bourne would be searching for Marie, and then he gets poisoned by Abbott to render him unconscious, and then the movie plays out, and then we get a scene with him and Abbott at the end here before he goes to meet Marie, and Abbott's trying to bring him back into the fold somewhat. And that scene's kind of interesting, and it's well played. Gabriel Mann, probably the most prominent sort of lackey in the Treadstone stuff. They brought him back for Supremacy as well. He pops up very briefly in that sequence. It's a well acted scene. It's probably not terrible, but the framing device would have been obviously unnecessary, and it would have undermined the kind of immediacy of the movie by this is the past. Yeah, and taking a lot of the tension away.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think this sort of simple ending works great.
Yeah,
he just sort of it shows that he still has the skills to find her, without having a clue where she'd gone to,
Apparently, there's a little detail where the that red backpack that he wears all throughout a lot of the movie, that's actually a flower pot in the background of that scene.
That's it. That's right. Yeah, it was on the right. You could see that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of this nice little closure to the movie, and a proper happy ending, which kind of feels a bit bittersweet given what came afterwards.
I know, it's always the same with these sort of things, that they'd end it quite nicely, then the second one's like, right, let's kill everyone off.
Yeah, we've got to dismantle this ending.
And actually the music as well, baby, is it Moby, isn't it?
Extreme Waves. Yeah, they did I believe they did a remix of it by the time of Ultimatum. I quite like the remix, especially.
They always brought it back, didn't they, for the end titles, didn't they?
Yeah. It kind of became a signature, and it's a damn good song. It makes you, kind of brings you out on a bit of a high there, even when the movie before it wasn't very good. In the case of the later ones,
I saw the executive producer name. Well, no, producer name was actually Patrick Crowley, who'd worked at Orion, because he had worked on RoboCop 2 and 3, and has gone to do obviously bigger and better movies.
I just wanted to go back to that alternative bookend scenes, because his costume is different in those scenes. It's a different ending with Marie. So the footage of her lending out the scooters is identical, but instead the actual reunion takes place outside. And it's super cheesy. Like it's a proper Hollywood version of that ending. And again, shows you how careful the tone had to be on this. I don't know why they decided if we're getting the insurance ending, why we had to end it on a big silly note like that when we've worked so hard to go against that kind of thinking.
Is it cheesy because it's also underscored with a kind of like a romantic-y kind of theme or something? Or
it has like a big like kind of pop song
underneath
it, like we're coming back together again, something like that, and it's shot against the setting sun. There's like a big sloppy kiss. You just go, that would have ruined the ending. That was what would have.
You should have ended with him giving a sort of a life sucking like kiss like Roger Moore does, like this just drains all energy.
It's just a bit much. Like it doesn't feel in keeping with the rest of the film. Apparently they never actually did a proper test screen the movie with that in it. They just kind of tested the movie with that, and they just felt, it's fine. So it didn't pop up until the 2004 DVDs, where you could branch it, and I use that in a very loose term, because it's all in rough work print form, so it's not integrated into the movie, so it looks bad.
Well, it's interesting when people want to see everything. I want to see all the footage. You think, well, things are cut out generally for good reasons sometimes, where it is to maintain a consistent tone where things just didn't quite work, in the edit. And sometimes when you do see it, you think, oh god, that's like, good job that didn't go in the film,
Yeah, there's a lot of deleted scenes where I watch them and I go, I can tell immediately why they cut these.
Yeah. There's some deleted scenes you do watch, you think, oh, that's a good scene. Why did they cut that out? And often the case of that particular scene, it may just be down to simple case of runtime, or like a scene later on they kind of shot kind of condenses one moment they cut out into a more efficient manner.
You want to talk about scenes where you go, I wish they hadn't cut that out of the movie. Kind of keeping it on brand here. The Bourne Legacy, if you got the Blu-ray of that, definitely check out the deleted scenes, because Albert Finney's major scene in that movie was entirely deleted, and it's a fairly lengthy scene. On one level, you can understand why they cut it, because obviously side character, not really to do with the main plot. But Albert Finney is so good in that scene.
Really?
And it's he gets killed off at the end of that scene, and you just go, why the fuck did they cut that? Like you went to the effort of bringing back Albert Finney, and then you cut out pretty much his only major scene in the movie. Why did you do that? That's disrespectful. So, yeah, it's better than half the stuff that's actually in the movie.
I remember when Christopher Lee got upset because he got cut out of at the beginning of Return of the King.
That should have been in the movie, by the way.
Yeah, but it was all left for the extended cut. But it was like, oh my god, what? Yeah, it's like, and he understood why he was pissed off, because it didn't really help the scene of him being cut out. It just didn't make sense why he disappeared. But yeah, there you go.
I feel like in 2002 there was definitely the sense that Bond kind of had blood in the water, like Bond was kind of showing its age a little bit, and Die Another Day definitely feels like a response to that, where it's incorporating these kind of sci-fi elements to try and update it.
Yeah.
But it just makes this franchise feel out of date, and Triple X was kind of the response to that.
Yeah.
And the thinking of the time was, oh, Triple X is going to be the big new action franchise.
No, it's weird.
That didn't turn out to be the case now, did it?
Not at all. No. This is like a sequel, like years later, didn't they? Or like a third one. I can't remember now. Is there three of them?
The third one was very belated and was like clearly an attempt to try and duplicate the Fast and Furious success. They had that first sequel with Ice Cube, which pretty much torpedoed Triple X, really. But the thought was like, oh, people are going to be into extreme sports and stuff, and that's kind of where things were heading. And now you look at that movie and it's just like, wow, that's very much of its time.
Yeah.
Whereas Bourne is actually like the counter to that, and look at the amazing longevity it ended up having after all that.
So Mathew, sort of final thoughts. Do you think it's the best of the Bourne series, or would you go with maybe one of the sequels?
I think I'd have to properly rewatch them because it's been a while. Like I said, I hadn't really rewatched any of the movies since 2016 when Jason Bourne was coming out, and that movie was kind of, in my mind, kind of so bad that it kind of made me want. I didn't want to kind of go back to the series for a while. I think they all have their individual strengths. Like, I think Ultimatum has the best action out of any of them. And some of the sequences in that are really great. But there's also great moments in Supremacy, like the car chase with Karl Urban at the end of it is almost up to the level of the car chase in this one. I feel like as an all-round movie, Identity is probably the best one, maybe? I mean, Supremacy is very close. Supremacy is very much on a similar level.
I suppose because I like the idea of sort of the guy, Jason Bourne, sort of piecing together his past, and you're with him and in the early stages, which is always kind of like, that's what sold you on this series. So it's that sort of nugget and idea is kind of still kind of strong to it sort of take the spot of being perhaps the best. But I love the energy of number 2.
Supremacy kind of ups the ante a bit, and kind of we see a different side of Bourne, of kind of more violent, vengeful side of him, and also it kind of goes deeper into its past, because you had the Treadstone stuff, but it's not really kind of fully revealed until the end of Identity, whereas in Supremacy, because that's all kind of been laid out now, that gives them kind of more room to go in depth, and I feel like it kind of feels like a natural sort of, I guess, continuation of where Identity could have gone.
Well, perhaps we could do a commentary on number 2.
Maybe.
Yeah. So I hate to revisit that film as well, because I was going to watch number 2. Well, it's a problem. I do this all the time. I watch a movie for a commentary and think, oh, there's fucking sequels. I'm going to watch them as well. And I get this like,
it's a lot of work.
You have to sort of like forget, or like, oh, I've got the time tonight to watch it. So I'm a sucker.
Not just the time. You got to figure out like, there's another 2 hours we got to film.
Yeah. I'm terrible for like, even just like when I'm not doing a commentary, I pick a film and think, there's like 4 sequels to this. Let's watch those as well. That was terrible for sequels.
I'm terrible for watching stuff and going, I need to review this, and like, but I've got a load of other stuff that I've watched that I need to catch up on. The time management of being a creator.
yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare. So that's why I never plan too far ahead, because my mind flip-flops a lot. If I lay out like, I'm going to do the next 5 retrospectives on these particular films, and after about 2 I'm like, nah, I'm going to change my list up a bit, because I just don't want to do it. Something else.
I'm not seeing it anymore.
Something else comes along and think, let's talk about that film. But there you go.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, that's the end of the commentary. Hope you enjoyed it. As I said, me and Mathew will be back with some more in future. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.
Take care.